Hi, Rebound Stronger listeners. Fauzi here. I'm super excited to introduce my friend from School of Greatness Academy, Jennifer Vroom. Shout out and thank you to Delane Cooper, our common friend, for connecting us. Jennifer is a national certified speech language pathologist and communications expert. She has been working in this field for the past 16 years. She received her master's degrees in speech pathology from UNC-Chapel Hill in North Carolina in 2000. She also earned Accent Modification Certifications and helped numerous clients from United States and abroad, helping them to strengthen and improve their communication skills. Hi, Jennifer. Welcome to Rebound Stronger podcast. So great to have you here.
Hi, it's so great to be here as well. Thank you for inviting me on.
Jennifer, are you ready to inspire?
I am ready. I'm ready to inspire and be inspired as well.
Great. So I will start with reading a quote from Brian Tracy about communication, since we are talking about communications in this episode. So he says, communications is a skill that you can learn. It's like riding a bicycle. If you are willing to work at it, you can rapidly improve the quality of every part of your life. So that's a quote from Brian Tracy. So let's start with something positive also. Jennifer, what's got you very happy this week?
Let's see, things that I'm grateful for. One of the things that I try to do every day is think about things I'm grateful for. So things that make me happy would include, first off, my relationships in my life and my connections that I've made. So I think across time, I've been so grateful that they've evolved the way they have. My love relationship, my family relationships, as well as my friendships. So that's one of the things for sure that I'm very grateful for and that makes me super happy. And then I would also say just all the many abundances in my life. I think a lot of times people just think of abundance in terms of financial wealth, and I look at it in terms of all the different things that we have that make us wealthy in our lives, including the relationships, including my home, running water that's clean that I can drink and bathe in, food at my access. So many things. This computer that allows me to connect with you and your listeners.
Yes, the internet connections. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm intrigued. In our introductions, you are a speech language pathologist, right? This is a new term for me. Can you explain more about it?
Sure. Speech language pathology. So regarding that field, it's a very broad umbrella term that comprises many different areas that I can assess and treat. So in other words, I get to work with people with all sorts of communication disorders that fall under the speech language pathology umbrella. So that could include voice issues, language issues, both in understanding and expressing themselves with language. It could include articulation, which means sound production. It can include motor issues. So if you have difficulties just moving your mouth to create the sounds or to get out your words, so oral motor difficulties. Let's see what else. Fluency. And that would be things like stuttering would be another area that I could work on. And then a lot of people don't realize, but we also as speech pathologists work on swallowing disorders. We work on cognitive issues as well. So could be traumatic brain injury. I mean, it's really wide. It's pretty crazy that it encompasses so many different areas. But any type of communication difficulty a person has, I can basically help with that. So many different areas. Yes.
During your initial years, also you extensively work in clinical speech pathologies, right?
Correct.
So can you share more about that?
Sure. Yes. As you said in the introduction, I graduated in 2000 with my master's degree from UNC-Chapel Hill, which is here in North Carolina, and that's where I reside now. And since that time, I've been working in the clinical field in speech language pathology. I've also done other work as far as communication coaching, which is separate because those are individuals without communication disorders. But in the clinical side, I have worked basically in every possible setting you can work. I like variety, and I always love to learn new things. And my field allows me to do that. So I've taken full advantage. I've worked in skilled nursing facilities. I've worked in hospital settings. I've worked in the school system, preschools, home health. I've done pretty much everything except acute care at a hospital setting. So I've just tried out all different areas and have loved working with all of my patients. I'm very lucky.
I've learned also that you've worked with people who has autism. So maybe I want to pick your brain. If you can share with us, what are the challenges faced by a person who has autism, and also what are the challenges for people around a person who has autism?
Sure. Yes, I think that nowadays, because unfortunately it's so prevalent, the rate of autism has increased significantly. So I think a lot of people know the term autism. I'm not sure that most people still understand what's associated with it. So it is.
Yeah, maybe you can start by explaining that, maybe.
Sure. And that talks of their difficulties as well. So that's wonderful. About 1 in 68 children now in the U.S. have a diagnosis of autism, somewhere on the spectrum, which is pretty staggering. And one of the main characteristics that you'll see for anybody who is on what we call a spectrum. So it means you could have very minimal difficulties all the way up to very significant difficulties. So if you think of a line, if you're visualizing, it could be anywhere on that line, and it looks different from one person to another. So no one person with autism will look exactly the same as another. Everyone has different characteristics, but one thing they do all have in common is a difficulty with social interactions and social skills. And that definitely affects negatively themselves in making friends with other people and in their family connections. So when you think about social interactions, what we call in speech pathology pragmatics or social skills, that's a big part of language in your capability, because what's the point of communicating? It's to communicate with somebody and create a connection in some way, to share and exchange information in some way. And so if you don't have an understanding of all the basic rules that most of us know naturally, if I ask the average person, tell me, what is the outline of a good conversation? Most of us have never really thought about it. We've never outlined it. We don't have to learn those rules. But with autism, they do. They don't know how to necessarily do turn taking. I need to actually let the other person talk some, and I need to take a turn in a conversation. They don't know necessarily to have eye contact. They don't like making eye contact a lot of times. They might not know how to do storytelling skills, right? So how to be able to share things about their life and retell about recent events. They might not do that at all. They don't like to greet, just the basics of like small talk to get to the meat of the conversation. So those are some big things that we see in common with a lot of people with autism that I end up working on very closely with a lot of my clients.
How we can support them, or how we can improve if we have somebody in our family, be it our children, who has autism. So how we can support them, or how we can improve our communications with them?
Well, one thing to know about most people with autism, or many of them, is that they're very literal. They don't understand what we call figurative language. A lot of what we use in language is figurative, actually. And actually, a lot of second language learners also have difficulty with some of this too, what we call idioms, for example. Right? Like, I'm just pulling your leg.
Yes.
Well, I'm not actually pulling a leg. Someone with autism might think you're pulling their leg, like, don't pull my leg. They don't get the nuances of language in that way. So being very clear would be something. And again, you'd have to know that particular individual and what their specific needs are. But generally, I would say being very clear in your communication and understanding that they may have these difficulties. And so it may take, you may see communication breakdown, and it may take patience on the part of the listener or the lead in the communication to help it to be more successful. And I would say another thing too that you had brought up before that I didn't really go into detail. I mean, it's very sad to see, there are many people with autism who there's a lot of frustration involved, because if you can imagine the lack of social connection then that they're able to make. So friendships are very hard to both make and to keep. I mean, I've seen that at all age levels. When I've worked with elementary school kids, high school students, and even adults, you'll see this. And still, of course, because if you're unable to do those social niceties and those basics, people see you as awkward. They may not even know exactly what it is about that person, but something's off. And so they have such difficulty interacting, even with family members. One of the signs early on is the lack of the eye contact and also not wanting as much physical touch. So even for parents and families, I mean, that can be really hard to deal with. So being understanding as someone on the outside, interacting with someone with autism and still making the effort to make connection with them, and appreciating their differences, I think is something that's really important. I absolutely love working with the population of people with autism. I think they're just amazing individuals, and they're so intelligent, and they have so much to offer. And there's a quirkiness there that I actually love and appreciate. And I think that if we can all make the effort to at least, be understanding in their communication difficulties, I think that would be very helpful. But there's a movie I actually did see recently, and it's called Autism in Love. And it's a documentary. And I love watching documentaries, but that one in particular, since I work with people with autism as well, was especially intriguing. But it was heartbreaking. There was one adult that they were following. He was a young male, and I mean, it's heartbreaking because it shows his frustration, and he expresses it. And they're very open about how they're feeling, and maybe not even understanding why or how they're different, but they know they are, and they just can't make those connections. It's a good one if you want to gain a little more insight into the world of autism and how they struggle, and try to create connection with one another or with others in their community. But also it shows how it's a common desire that we all have. Everybody wants to be loved.
Yes.
Everybody wants to be connected, and they're not the only ones that struggle with it. I work with a lot of clients on social anxieties and also just difficulty connecting with other people in various interactions. So it's something that we can all relate to.
Yes, definitely. So you brought up this point about connecting with other people, right? What are the elements or which is important for connecting with other people?
Sure. Well, I would say one of the main things is developing what we call presence. And that includes things like, I would say active listening is something really important to communication. A lot of us are always in our own heads thinking about what we want to say to the other person. We're not fully present. And when you are present and you're caring about what the other person is saying, you are connecting with them. And so a lot of what I even say to my clients as a leader, we feel comfortable and confident enough to give the stage to our listener, or other person rather, that we're communicating with. They can have the stage first. They can be the one to talk first, and we will be the listener actually. And engaging in active listening means we're not on our iPhone and texting saying, oh, go ahead, I can do this at the same time. No, it's not doing that. That's actually very rude. It's giving our full attention to and caring about what they're saying, and maybe following up with things. But I think that's a huge part of connecting with somebody. And connecting is also finding commonalities. That's what we're looking for when we're talking with people, is appreciating differences, but also finding what we have in common with them, I think, and we can create a connection in that way.
Being present, active listenings, and appreciating the difference, but also trying to find some commonality. Great.
Absolutely.
So going back to the quotes in the beginning, right? So, and which Brian Tracy says that communications is a skill we can learn and work on. So based on your experience, so what are the things we can do to work on or to improve our communications with others?
Sure. One thing that I like to stress to other people that I don't think we're all aware of, but when you look at the breakdown of communication, most of communication, or what we are communicating in our message, is going to be perceived by the other person through the visuals.
Mm-hmm.
They say that only 7% of our message is conveyed through the spoken words that we choose and use. The rest of the message, 93%, is actually conveyed through our voice, and then 55% of that is body language.
Mm-hmm.
So thinking about, what are you doing with your body? How are you presenting yourself? Because when you move your body in different ways, as Amy Cuddy, a famous psychologist and associate professor at Harvard, she studies on this, and there's that mind-body connection. I love her work, so her book Presence is one I would definitely recommend. I absolutely love that. And it talks of the mind-body connection, and by changing your body and being aware of what you're doing with it, in our posturing, in our movements, facial expressions even, that's something that will really affect what you're thinking and feeling, and also how the other person is going to perceive you and your message. Now, it doesn't mean that they're going to be consciously saying, oh, she's got a closed body position, so she must be thinking this, or she's conveying this to me. They're not consciously doing it, but unconsciously or subconsciously, they will perceive differently, and you in turn also will be presenting yourself differently. If I have an open body position, I'm automatically, and I do this purposely, so then I'm purposely also making myself open to what the other person has to say as well. So I'm changing my whole perception of what I'm receiving and also what I'm giving to them. It changes that whole dynamic in interaction. So I would say definitely one of the main things people can do to automatically make some improvements is thinking about more expansive body positioning, thinking about using more gestures, thinking about is your face or are your facial expressions matching the words that are coming out of your mouth and your voice. It's so important. I mean, even with family members in the past, I know, my dad, he might say like, oh, I'm so excited. It's like, well, Dad, you don't sound very excited. Your voice isn't matching your words. He's like, I just thought I was excited. It's like, well, wait a minute. But there's that whole matching to be true to what your words are conveying. Yeah. Your voice doesn't match it, and your face also, right? Like, I'm so happy. Well, wait a minute. They told me you're not. So just being authentic means also syncing your nonverbal language and expression with your verbal. So I would say that's something automatically people can start to think about and just identify for themselves what they're doing.
How do you define a good communication or a good communicator?
Sure. It touches on a lot of those skills we actually just talked about. I think a good communicator is someone who is able to create connection and have presence in their interactions and can effectively convey their message to the other person as they intended to. And even if you didn't initially, you can correct that, right? You can always repair a communication breakdown as well. So, but it's getting to the point where you're effectively conveying what you're intending to share with that other person. And it's a syncing of your nonverbal and your verbal language. Right. So you present an authentic self and you're conveying in a message that you are wanting to convey to them.
Jennifer, what's your current passion now?
My current passion, well, moving aside, taking all of the experiences I've had in the past, I've learned many lessons with my previous clients, and I've seen such commonalities in other lines of work as well, which it's under the communication umbrella again, but I've been working more with leaders and entrepreneurs and people who are basically thought leaders and influencers. And what I my passion is to reach a wider audience, really. I've done a lot of one-on-one and small group sessions, and I continue to do that. But now I'm working, like I said, with leaders who they have their own audience. And so I feel like by helping them with their communication skills and to be able to be more impactful in delivering their message to their audience, then I'm just able to affect the communication and connections to a wider degree than I have in the past. So that's really been a passion of mine more recently that I've been putting a lot of energy and work into, is working, like I said, in coaching sessions. So working on things like what we talked about, working on the body language, facial expressions, active listening skills, reducing social anxiety, public speaking skills, just basically gaining confidence in our communication. And so it's been just a lot of fun being able to collaborate with other leaders and be inspired by other people, and at the same time be inspiring too, hopefully with my communication coaching services. So
awesome. With all this, where do you see yourself 5 years from now?
5 years from now, I see myself doing similar things where with my passions, my current passions that I've been putting most of my time into. I see myself definitely continuing to do some coaching work, also more online services where I can do things like webinars, and like I said, reaching a wider audience is really my goal. And one thing I want to create for myself, a 5-year plan, is to have more freedom in my schedule, because one of the things that I have as a goal is to be able to outreach to what would be the term, to other places. Like I've seen Tanzania, for example. I went there earlier this year. I was able to hike Kilimanjaro, which was awesome. But while there also, there was definitely a need for speech pathology work. There are places around the world, and even other places in the US I've definitely worked as well, that have a need, that they're underserved. But there are places that don't have access to good speech language pathology services. And I would love to be able to help to provide that service. I do most of my work over the internet now, and it's telespeech work is what we call that. So it would be great to set up areas that, again, don't have access and provide education and outreach in that way. So that's something I would really like to have set up and running 5 years from now, for sure, if not sooner. Yeah. So that's another passion project I have.
Looking forward to see that into the reality.
Yes, absolutely.
Any books you really like and would like to recommend to our listeners?
Yes. Let's see. Well, one of them I already said, and that's Presence by Amy Cuddy. If you're interested in working on communication skills, I love that book. I definitely would recommend that. It's on that mind-body connection and building confidence and presence. Another book that I love, which is just on life lessons, and it's a short read too, but a great one, is The 4 Agreements. I think a lot of people might have already read this. Don Miguel Ruiz, yes. One of my favorite books that I just reference and think about as far as relationships and making connection with others. Again, I think maybe many of your readers have accessed this already. It's The 5 Love Languages. I love that because it involves taking other people's perspective and taking yourself out of your own needs and what are the other person's needs and how can I help to meet those needs. And that's a big part of making connection, is perspective taking. Yeah. And so I love that, and it gives a lot of good insights on how to improve different relationships. And then I would say also another couple of books that I think, again, it's on life lessons, and a good thing is they have exercises that help you to make improvements on your daily life. One is The School of Greatness by Lewis Howes. We have to give a shout out to him, as we met in Soga, in fact.
Somewhere there.
Somewhere up there. I think I will see it right there. But, I think, Fauzi, you and I probably put a lot of these things already into our practice, and we've been guided through that as well in the academy. But for those who haven't been through the academy or don't maybe already have a sort of routine for themselves, that's a great way to lead you through that process and to give you that education. So it's a good book. And another that's a kind of a similar thing would be Awaken the Giant Within by Tony Robbins, I would say.
Yeah.
So those are some great ones. I mean, I love books, so I could go on forever about books that I would recommend. I love to collect books. It's definitely, reading is a big part of my life. So
thanks for the recommendation, Jennifer.
Sure.
Two final questions. How people can get in touch with you?
Sure. Well, I am on Facebook, so that's one great way to find me. And LinkedIn also, I'm active on now. And you can also just access me through my website, which is vroomcommunication.com. And you can always message me through there. It goes straight to my email. So that would be another great way to connect with me. But I would encourage your listeners to friend me on Facebook and just personal message me if you have any questions specific to yourself or regarding communication or my coaching services. I would love to connect with you and your audience.
Final questions. What's your definitions of courage, Jennifer?
Oh, my definition of courage is, I would say, moving forward with your goal or some action, speaking up about something when you don't have support from others or encouragement. So despite being faced with adversity, you're still going to go for it anyways, whatever that goal is. So you're not allowing others to stop you from pursuing whatever it is you're passionate about. You're living freely and you're living fully and passionately according to your own values, despite what other people might think. So I would say, yeah, even when you're facing fear, I mean, we all have fear in life, and we're not going to get rid of it, but despite the fear, you're going to still move forward.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for your time and for sharing your experience as a speech pathologist. You're sharing your experience in dealing with the children or people with autism, how we can communicate better with them, and also in sharing us the tips how we can become a better communications, being present, being mindful about our body language, syncing what we're saying with our expression or our body language. Thank you so much. So great to have you here.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed this. Thank you so much for having me on.
Hey, if you like what we are creating with this podcast, make sure you join our Rebound Stronger Facebook group. This is the group where you can interact with like-minded people who wants to take their life to the next level, people who wants to turn their low points into breakthroughs. And as a bonus, the past podcast guests have also joined the group. So check it out and go to reboundstronger.com/group, or you can also search the group in the Facebook. Just use the keyword Rebound Strongers, and we have big plans for you and the members. So see you inside.